The time is 10:14 a.m. The South China Sea, approximately 62 nautical miles west-northwest of Scarborough Shoal. The water here is flat and pale blue in the morning light, the kind of calm surface that looks inviting until you remember that every square mile of it is legally contested by at least 3 countries and diplomatically contested by roughly half a dozen more. The USS Benfold, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, DDG-65, is conducting a routine Freedom of Navigation Operation, FONOP in Navy shorthand, transiting through international waters that Beijing has spent the better part of a decade insisting are not international at all. Nobody aboard Benfold is under any illusions about what this transit means or what it will produce. A FONOP in the South China Sea is not an accident. It is a carefully choreographed assertion of international maritime law, executed with the deliberate calm of an institution that has been doing this since before the current generation of Chinese naval officers were in academy. The crew knows the script. There will be radio challenges in Mandarin and English. There will be shadowing vessels. There will, with near certainty, be a close approach event of some description. The question is never whether any of this will happen. The question is how creative the other side decides to get today. In the Combat Information Center, the Tactical Action Officer is nursing a coffee that was brewed fresh 11 minutes ago and is already developing the particular flat warmth of CIC coffee everywhere, a phenomenon that appears to be independent of brewing quality and may simply be thermodynamics expressing an opinion about naval service. The watch team is alert, relaxed, and faintly bored in the specific way that professionals are bored when they are very good at something, and the something has not yet produced a surprise. On the bridge, the officer of the deck is tracking 3 contacts on the surface picture. 2 have been with them since they entered the 9-dash line's claimed boundary 2 hours prior. 1 plan frigate, Type 054A, maintaining station approximately 4 nautical miles to the northeast, close enough to communicate intent without being close enough to require immediate response, which is itself a kind of professional courtesy between navies that have done this dance before. The second contact is a China Coast Guard cutter, ZH-31 class, sitting 3 miles to the south and doing nothing in particular except existing in a pointed way. The third contact is the one the officer of the deck is watching. It showed up 31 minutes ago, identified on the electronic chart as a fishing vessel, hull registry consistent with a Guangdong province trawler, AIS transponder, broadcasting a vessel name, a home port, a fishing license number, and a course suggesting it is either looking for squid or executing a precision intercept geometry on the Benfold's projected track. The AN/SPY-1D radar has been watching it for 40 minutes. The contact speed is 11 knots. Fishing trawlers in the South China Sea troll at 3 to 5 knots when they are actually fishing, and 11 knots when they are something else. The officer of the deck noted this 11 minutes ago. He hasn't changed his coffee order. He is watching, though, because this is the one that hasn't been in the script before. The vessel is not alone. Behind it, maintaining a loose 300-meter spread on a course that makes geometric sense only if you're completing a specific pattern rather than fishing, are 4 more contacts, all registering AIS signatures consistent with fishing vessels. all making 11 knots. All on vectors that, if held for another 22 minutes, would produce a rough encirclement of the Benfold's projected position at coordinates that happen to be the precise point where FONOP transit routes in this sector typically turn south. Somebody had done some homework. The tactical action officer set down his coffee with the gentle precision of a man who has decided something is now interesting. "OOD," he said, "I've got a geometry problem for you." Here is the geometry problem. The Chinese maritime militia. And let's be precise about what we're discussing, because Beijing calls them fishermen, and the U.S. 7th Fleet calls them something rather different, operates approximately 300 vessels in the South China Sea on any given day. They look like fishing boats. They are registered as fishing boats. They carry fishing equipment. Some of them occasionally catch fish, but they move in military formation, communicate on frequencies that fishing boats don't use, respond to naval coordination commands that fishing boats don't receive, and appear with notable consistency in locations where the People's Liberation Army Navy would find their presence professionally convenient. It is, as deceptions go, not particularly sophisticated. A fishing fleet that operates in geometrically perfect holding patterns, that materializes on FONOP routes with the timing of a planned intercept, and that maintains spacing consistent with standard naval formation doctrine, is a fishing fleet in roughly the same sense that a tiger wearing a hat is a house cat. The hat is a nice touch, but it isn't doing the work Beijing thinks it's doing. The 5 contacts now converging on the Benfold's track were maintaining exactly 340 meters of separation. A figure that is not random, that doesn't emerge from fishermen eyeballing each other across the water, and that happens to correspond to the standard formation spacing for coordinated surface approach operations, as described in planned tactical doctrine documents that analysts in Honolulu have been reading for several years. The AN/SPY-1D was tracking all 5. It was also tracking the Type 054A frigate, which had shifted its position slightly in the past 8 minutes. Not dramatically, not in a way that would register as threatening on its own, but in a way that placed it at a bearing from the Benfold that would be geometrically useful if the 5 incoming contacts were meant to compress the Benfold's maneuver options from the west while the frigate compressed them from the east. The tactical action officer looked at the plot. He looked at the Type 054A. He looked at the 5 fishing vessels that were not fishing. He picked up his coffee again. "That's actually pretty well coordinated," he said, to nobody in particular, with the flat appreciation of a chess player acknowledging that the other side has executed a solid opening gambit. For fishing boats, this is the point in the story where the Benfold situation deserves honest examination. Because honest examination is what makes the eventual outcome funny rather than just predictable. The Benfold is not, at this moment, operating with the tactical luxury of open water. She's in the South China Sea, which is to open water what a crowded parking garage is to the American West. Technically the same category of navigable space, practically a completely different problem. The traffic separation scheme, the shoaling waters around Scarborough Shoal to the east, the presence of 3 separate Chinese naval and quasi-naval contacts, and the approaching formation geometry from the west have collectively reduced the Benfold's unrestricted maneuvering options to a corridor roughly 15 miles wide, running north to south. 15 miles sounds like a lot. In a strait or a channel, it's comfortable. In the South China Sea, with a coordinated compression maneuver developing from two vectors simultaneously, 15 miles is the kind of space that forces a commanding officer to think carefully about which direction he wants to be inconvenienced from. And the Benfold has a second problem. The SH-60B Seahawk, assigned to Benfold for this transit, is currently on the flight deck. It is not broken. It is not in maintenance. It is, in the precise technical language of naval aviation, out of available flight hours for the calendar day. A scheduling constraint that is entirely routine, entirely predictable, and entirely the kind of thing that looks fine on a planning spreadsheet until the morning produces an unplanned geometry problem in the South China Sea that would be considerably more convenient to observe from 800 feet with a FLIR sensor. The Benfold's aviation detachment had used their allocated hours on an earlier tasking. The helicopter sat on deck, available as an asset, unavailable as a ready aircraft without a waiver from a level of the chain of command that was 9 time zones away. The tactical action officer noted this, logged it, and moved on. You work with what you have. What he had was an SPY-1D, an SLQ-32, a full missile magazine, 2 5-inch guns, and a crew that had trained for exactly this kind of scenario for a combined total of several thousand hours. He had, in other words, more than enough. The AN/SLQ-32V-3 electronic warfare suite had been collecting since the first contact appeared, and what it was collecting was interesting in a way that went considerably beyond the current tactical situation. The 5 fishing vessels, which will be called fishing vessels throughout this narrative, in the same spirit that a formal dinner party calls the elephant in the corner a conversation piece, were emitting on several frequencies. Some of those emissions were consistent with the commercial navigation radar and AIS equipment that actual fishing vessels carry. But 2 of the vessels were also emitting on frequencies that actual fishing vessels do not carry. A data link frequency consistent with a Chinese naval tactical coordination network, and a low-power communication signal on a band that intelligence analysts had been flagging as associated with maritime militia operations for approximately 14 months. This was not the first time these emissions had been collected. It was, however, the first time they had been collected from this specific formation configuration, which provided correlation data that had been previously unavailable. The SLQ-32 suite was noting the precise transmission intervals, the encryption architecture, the network timing parameters, and the geolocation of each emitter with the patient thoroughness of a system that does not need to be anywhere else and has nowhere better to be. The Type 05 4A frigate was also emitting, which was less surprising but equally useful. Its fire control radar had swept the Benfold twice in the past 20 minutes, brief, professional sweeps that stopped well short of the continuous illumination that would constitute a weapons targeting event, but that were precisely characterized by the SLQ-32's threat library, updated and distributed via Link 16 to the USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group, operating 210 miles to the southeast. The Ronald Reagan's intelligence staff received the package at 10:29 a.m. and began cross-referencing it with previous 054A collection data before the Benfold's SLQ-32 had finished transmitting. The China Coast Guard cutter to the south had started up its own radar suite around 10:22 a.m., a ZH-31 class surface search radar, a system that is publicly documented and technically unremarkable, but whose specific emission parameters on this particular hull had not previously been captured. They were captured now. The signature was logged, characterized, tagged with the hull identifier, and added to a file that would eventually make its way to a naval intelligence annex that does not appear in publicly available documents. The Benfold was being approached by a coordinated formation. The coordinated formation was simultaneously being catalogued, fingerprinted, and archived with the systematic thoroughness of a library that collects everything and discards nothing. The fishing vessels were teaching the United States Navy how to identify them on a dark night with their AIS transponders switched off. The lesson was free. The tuition payment would come later in the form of a tactical picture that was slightly sharper the next time one of these formations materialized on a FONOP route in the South China Sea. At 10:33 a.m., the Benfold's commanding officer made a decision that was simple, unhurried, and completely correct. He ordered a course change to 045 degrees northeast, directly toward the Type 054A frigate's position, and a speed increase to 22 knots. This requires a brief explanation, because it looks counterintuitive if you're watching it from the outside and don't understand what it accomplishes. The 5 maritime militia vessels were approaching from the west and northwest, their formation designed to compress the Benfold toward the southeast and force a course deviation that would interrupt the FONUP transit line, and more importantly, produce footage of an American destroyer altering course in apparent response to Chinese pressure, which is the actual product Beijing is trying to manufacture. The footage is the mission. The formation doesn't need to do anything physically to the Benfold. It just needs to make the Benfold move in a direction that can be presented as retreat. Moving northeast directly toward the frigate accomplishes several things simultaneously. It breaks the compression geometry. The militia vessel's approach vectors were calculated for a target continuing on the FONOP transit heading, and a 45-degree course change north puts the Benfold outside the planned encirclement before the vessels can reposition to compensate. It places the Benfold on a course that is not retreat. It is, in fact, a course that closes on the most capable Chinese naval asset in the area, which is not the behavior of a ship that has been intimidated. And it forces the Type 054A to make a decision it hasn't been scripted for. The Benfold is now closing on it at 22 knots, and the frigate needs to figure out what it wants to do about that. The Type 054A held its position for 4 minutes. Then it began a slow turn north. In the CIC, the tactical action officer watched the frigate's track alter on the display. "The frigate's breaking north," the surface warfare coordinator reported. "Log it," the tactical action officer said. "What are the fishing boats doing?" "Slowing down. Lead vessel is coming to a stop." A pause. "So they're just stopped?" "Yes, sir. All 5. "Looks like they're thinking." The tactical action officer picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway, because sometimes the coffee situation and the tactical situation are both resolved, and neither resolution is worth excessive commentary. The human pulse of this engagement doesn't happen in the CIC. It happens at 10:41 a.m. on the bridge wing. The officer of the deck had stepped outside for 90 seconds of actual weather, which is a thing officers of the deck do when the tactical situation permits, and the recycled air of the bridge has begun to feel like something that has been breathed by everyone who has served on this ship since commissioning. He was looking northwest in the direction of the 5 militia vessels that were now roughly 2 miles off the port quarter, visibly stationary, their AIS tracks showing a cluster of contacts doing nothing in particular. The nearest one was close enough to see clearly. A weather-beaten trawler, blue hull, white superstructure, the kind of vessel that looks entirely ordinary until you notice the antenna configuration on its mast, which carries 2 more antenna systems than a trawler of its class needs for fishing operations, and the radar dome on the forward deckhouse that doesn't appear in the manufacturer's documentation for this hull type. A deckhand on the trawler was visible on the foredeck. He looked up at the Benfold passing to the east. He raised a hand, the universal maritime acknowledgement, the same gesture that has meant, "I see you, and you're not a hazard," on every ocean since there were boats to make it. The officer of the deck raised a hand back. The same gesture. Completely neutral. The diplomatic equivalent of 2 pedestrians making eye contact at a crosswalk. Then, the officer of the deck went back inside and picked up the radio to report that the militia formation had stopped and was no longer maneuvering. He delivered this information with the practiced flatness of a man who has decided that the morning has been adequately eventful and wishes to complete his watch without further geometry problems. Behind the Benfold, still stationary at 2 miles, the 5 fishing vessels that were not fishing began a slow, independent dispersal that looked, from a sufficient altitude, with a sufficient sensor, exactly like what it was. A formation releasing after an unsuccessful intercept geometry had been broken before it could be established. Nobody aboard those vessels radioed an explanation. Nobody needed to. The Benfold's course change had made the explanation unnecessary. The Ronald Reagan's intelligence staff completed their initial analysis package at 11:52 a.m. and distributed it via secure link to 7th Fleet, Indo-Pacific Command, and the Office of Naval Intelligence in Suitland, Maryland. The package covered 3 distinct collection elements from the Benfold's morning transit. The first element was the maritime militia formation characterization. The 5 vessels' tactical data link emissions had been cross-referenced against a database of 847 previously collected samples and produced matches that allowed analysts to associate 2 of the 5 vessels with specific prior incidents. One, a 2021 formation that had conducted a similar approach on a Philippine Coast Guard vessel near Whitsun Reef. One, a 2022 event near the Paraxel Islands. This wasn't collection of new capability information. This was identification. The difference between knowing that fishing boats are being used as a militia force in general and knowing that these specific fishing boats, with these specific hull numbers, have a documented operational history that can be placed in front of diplomatic and legal bodies that care about documented operational histories. The second element was the Type 054A's fire control radar characterization. The two sweeps of the Benfold at 10:17 a.m. and 10:24 a.m. had produced a complete emission profile for that specific hull's EMH-346 fire control radar, including a frequency agility pattern that had not previously been documented for this variant. Frequency agility, the ability of a radar to jump between frequencies to complicate jamming, is a tactically significant capability, and knowing the specific agility pattern of a specific hull's radar is the kind of information that makes the electronic warfare planning for any future encounter with that frigate slightly more straightforward than it would otherwise be. The third element was the China Coast Guard cutter's radar signature, which has already been described above, and which was, in the scheme of things, the least tactically significant of the three collection packages, but which contributed to a growing database that is intended to ensure that no Chinese Coast Guard vessel operating in the South China Sea is anonymous from an emissions standpoint. The Benfold had been the target of a coordinated approach operation. The Benfold had also spent 2 hours and 41 minutes as a collection platform for the combined intelligence architecture of the United States 7th Fleet. Both things were true simultaneously. The people planning the approach operation had presumably intended only one of them. Beijing's response arrived in 3 channels. The official Foreign Ministry statement, released at 3:15 p.m. local time, described the Benfold's FONUP as a severe violation of Chinese sovereignty and a deliberate provocation that threatened regional peace and stability. The statement demanded that the United States immediately cease its illegal activities and warned of resolute countermeasures. It did not specify what those countermeasures would be. It never does. The phrase resolute countermeasures has appeared in so many Chinese Foreign Ministry statements regarding South China Sea FONOPs that naval intelligence analysts in Honolulu have a running informal tally of how many times it has been used since 2016. The current count is not publicly available, but it is substantial. The second channel was Chinese state media, which ran a report at 4:42 p.m. describing how Chinese maritime forces had successfully monitored and warned off the USS Benfold as it illegally intruded into Chinese territorial waters. The report featured footage of what appeared to be Chinese maritime vessels operating assertively in blue water, accompanied by graphics showing the 9-dash line boundary and the Benfold's track rendered in a way that placed it visually inside those claimed boundaries. The Benfold's actual track, which ran through international waters and was documented by GPS log, satellite observation, and the independent observation of Filipino maritime authorities operating 90 miles to the east, was not featured in the report. The third channel was the one that the 7th Fleet intelligence staff found most professionally interesting. A series of posts on Chinese military social media platforms describing the morning's events from the perspective of what were described as patriotic fishermen who had bravely confronted the American vessel. The posts included photographs, some of which, on close examination, appeared to have been taken from a vessel in approximately the position that the AIS data showed the lead militia trawler occupying between 10:15 and 10:41 a.m. The intelligence staff looked at the photographs with interest. The antenna configuration visible on the foredeck of the posting vessel was consistent with the SLQ-32's emission collection. The radar dome on the forward deckhouse was visible in 2 of the images. The vessel had documented itself. The post was preserved, archived, and added to the operational file alongside everything else the Benfold had collected that morning. Somewhere, an analyst added a note to 2 existing vessel profiles. The note essentially said, "Confirmed." The 2 vessels that had been tentatively associated with prior incidents were now definitively associated. The social media posts had done the attribution work that would otherwise have required months of additional collection. The fishing vessels that were not fishing had, in the end, been quite helpful. The Benfold completed her Phonopy transit at 1:17 p.m., cleared the 9-lines claimed boundary to the south, and resumed normal operations. The Type 054A frigate shadowed her until approximately 12:40 p.m., then broke off to the northwest. The Coast Guard cutter had departed earlier, around 11:15 a.m., for reasons that were not broadcast on any frequency the SLQ-32 was monitoring. The 5 militia vessels remained stationary until at least 11:20 a.m., after which they scattered in 5 different directions on courses that had no obvious relationship to each other or to any productive fishing grounds. The Phonopy was recorded in the ship's log as complete. The intelligence collection package was transmitted to 7th Fleet. The Type 054A's new radar characterization was uploaded to the threat library. The militia vessel identifications went to a separate file maintained by a separate staff element, whose work is patient and cumulative rather than immediately operational. The officer of the deck completed his watch at 1 p.m. and was relieved by his relief, who received a briefing that included the morning's events and found them, by the standards of South China Sea phonop duty, moderately eventful. Not the most complicated morning, not the most routine. The kind of watch that generates a solid after-action report and a few updates to the contact database and doesn't make it into any press release. The Benfold's commanding officer wrote his report that evening. It was precise, professional, and dry in the way that naval officers write when they are describing something they found professionally satisfying without wanting to oversell it. The course change to 045 at 22 knots had worked exactly as intended. The collection had gone well. The formation's approach geometry had been broken before it could be established. Nobody had been required to do anything dramatic. 4,000 miles away in Beijing, the Foreign Ministry's statement was being drafted. Resolute countermeasures appeared in the 3rd paragraph. It always does. The Benfold's log showed a routine Phonopy transit, 2.5 hours of productive electronic collection, 1 course change, and 1 coffee that was consumed cold because the tactical situation had been more pressing than the coffee temperature. The log did not record the moment on the bridge wing. The log does not record most moments on bridge wings. But the officer of the deck's wave, neutral, unhurried, the minimum possible diplomatic gesture, returned to a deckhand on a fishing vessel that was not fishing, was seen by everyone on that foredeck who was paying attention. Which was everyone. Beijing declared sovereignty over the South China Sea in a press release. The United States Navy declared something different, with a course change, a speed increase, and a wave that contained, if you knew how to read it, an entire strategic position compressed into a single, unhurried gesture. The wave said, "We know what you are. We know what you're doing. We have logged everything about you, and we are not in the least bit inconvenienced. That's a lot to put in a wave. The officer of the deck managed it. The SLQ-32 had already sent the longer version ahead. Bye for now.